The full episode is now available on Patreon and YouTube memberships. Please see the link in the description for more details.
So, Trey, when the Bloodmoon leaks came out, I hit you up and I'm like, hey man, next time we have a conversation, we should definitely get you in on this. And I sent you a couple of pictures and you noticed something. And don't worry, I'll be posting the picture up as we're talking now. This picture here that you posted in our group chat right here. I don't Preston, can you see that? The one about uh Naomi Watts and she's next to the mural.
Did you send this to me on Facebook
No,
or
it's in our group chat here.
Okay, let me go. Let me see. Oh, I see it. Yes.
Trey, what did you have to
Oh.
say about this mural that you noticed?
Well, so okay, it's supposed to be Casterly Rock, right? This is the assumption.
Mm-hmm.
It is and somebody I noticed it and it looks Assyrian, like the art style looks Assyrian.
Yeah,
and
with
then
the chariot,
and I looked at it and it is a carbon copy of Ashurbanipal, who's like an Assyrian king, his lion hunt relief. And I'll put a link in the description here. It is just a carbon copy. They didn't even try. They flipped it, I guess. But yes.
Holy shit.
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad where they just got this image and we're like, let's just copy and paste it.
I mean, they changed. Do you think they changed the angle? Like, do you think they changed the angle like 10 degrees?
Oh, a little bit. Yeah, I guess the
It's a
lion, because the Ashurbanipal, the mural is him hunting lions using like a chariot, and there's like a lion launching towards him, and somebody with like a spear.
Yeah,
like,
I can see the lion launching towards the chariot. On
the version that ended up in Bloodmoon is a little bit different. Like you can see that the lion is overlapping with the chariot wheel as opposed to behind it, but it's pretty blatant. Yeah. So yeah, you were talking about how they were going more for like Bronze Age, and that's definitely the case with this mural. Like this is supposed to be like a Assyrian ancient Bronze Age mural. It's interesting too, because chariots, because for the Tyrion chapter for Winds of Winter that you've been working on, Preston, the charioteer is brought up. There's and like they use a chariot in the episode or in the chapter. And the weird thing I found is that like chariots are very, very rarely mentioned in the entire series.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because there's the charioteer at Slaver's Bay, who's like literally just a name. Like all we get is his name. We don't get a chariot described. And then the ice clans, I think north of the Wall, use chariots like bone chariots, but they're more like described like dog sleds.
Dog sleds, because dog chariots. Yeah, they're definitely dog sleds. Yeah,
and I don't know if they have.
And plus, they call them like bone chariots. Like it's very clear that they like put down two bones as like the skis, and that's all it is.
Yeah. So like actual like wheeled chariots are like not really mentioned besides maybe the charioteer. So it was kind of I was interested because this seems to confirm, because like we don't hear anything of like people in Westeros riding chariots in the past. Like all we hear is about them riding horses, and like it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of interesting because in the real world like chariots were a big deal. And humans only really later learned how to ride horses with like a saddle and stirrup and stuff. So I don't know. This is interesting as it implies that there was a period in Westeros where chariots existed and then they were phased out. I don't know.
Right. I mean, it's kind of where there's this weird line where, because you're right, that chariots, besides the dog sled chariot thing, the chariots of bone that everybody talks about, and the charioteer, you don't. The only other mention of a chariot in the series is when Quentin goes to Volantis and he looks at the walls of Volantis, of the inner city, and he describes it. He says, "Fused stone, 200 feet high, so thick that six 4-horse chariots could race around its top abreast." Now, why would anyone like? Why would that be their go-to fucking reference when there aren't chariots in your fucking world?
Actually, it's
Like-
not the
like-
only time it's mentioned. Once again, the world of Ice and Fire. The Sumeri people. I know the Sumeri people of the ancient Sumeri people of the grasslands of Central Essos. They used it
Yeah.
quite often.
Okay.
Okay, but it's, you know, take our society where we had chariots in the past, but like, would I ever look at like a wide space and be like, huh, this is so wide that you could have like chariots, like, you know, 6 4-horse chariots, like, right, like would that be my go-to description?
I
know?
think it's like lore building, because I think in the world book they explain that it's like something done during the celebration of the city or something. Like that the the people of Volantis like use the chariots to celebrate, and they run around their walls. It's weird.
Oh my god, as they do each year to celebrate the founding of the city. Oh, god damn it.
It's weird though, because chariots are mentioned so infrequently in the entire story.
Right, but it's so funny to be like, oh, it's so wide that this could be done. And you're like, oh, because it is done. Like, that's not, you know, like... Oh, I guess he does. No, I'm sorry. I'm wrong. And actually, he says it as well, as they did each year to celebrate the founding of the city. But he would still have to know what a chariot is, and to know the difference between a 2-horse chariot, a 4-horse chariot, stuff like that.
I was just gonna say, by the Middle Ages, chariots were like a bygone thing too. Like, okay, like it's not really the Middle Ages, but like I guess Song of Ice and Fire kind of takes place in like an equivalent, or even like the Renaissance, because they have like crossbows and stuff. But like chariots were like long gone by then. Nobody was using chariots because they had stirrups and saddles and stuff. No, it's weird. It's weird that anybody would still be using chariots, in my opinion.
Talking about them. Like when was the time of chariots in Westeros? Because, you know, Quentin's never left. I mean, I guess he has books and stuff, but like, or I mean, Jon as well knows what a chariot is, even if he says chariots of bones. You know, he must know what a chariot is by itself.
Yeah, this is weird. This was like the first mention of chariots like in Westeros, besides like the dog sled kind of thing. So no, it was interesting. I don't know if it would impact, I don't know, the Tyrion sample chapter. Like Tyrion will be like, yes, the old Casterlys rode chariots to hunt lions or something like that. I don't know.
Well, here's the problem with that is that
Yeah.
George was very open about him not being that hands-on with this project like he was with House of the Dragon. So this was like them doing their own thing, which is why I brought this up to you, this new picture I put in here, Trey.
Yes.
What armor is that? That looks a little Roman. Even the hairstyle kinda reminds me of Spartacus. I don't know if you've ever seen that TV show, Spartacus.
Yeah, he's wearing like a Corinthian style helmet, which is like a helmet used during the Peloponnesian War, and then he has like a linothorax, which is pretty common. It's a pretty common design for like ancient Greece, and even into like Rome and stuff. It's interesting. Yeah, they're definitely going. And then his sword. Oh my gosh, his sword is like a Mycenaean looking sword. You
know
when
what?
you're like
Real
an
quick, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
fucking love you that you know this. I love that I know you and that you can like just tackle that. So what you're saying is clearly not in medieval times. They were clearly going for something much more ancient, because this is something Preston brought up to me eons ago, is that for hundreds of years, Westeros has not advanced beyond the Middle Ages, medieval times. They've just keep consistently, I think it's part of your Maester conspiracy that they just keep technology down.
Yeah, but this reinterprets it as actually like it is advancing. It's just advancing really fucking slowly.
Ooh, ignore that.
You know, that this was a Bronze Age, you know, tale, and therefore like that all these things that when we think of the olden times, we think of it like Age of Heroes. We still think of it as medieval, even though, but there's reinterpreting and saying no, it's more Bronze Age.
Two things to keep in mind about this whole situation. The first and foremost is George was not involved, so we don't know if this is part of like the overall A Song of Ice and Fire book franchise canon. because that was one of the biggest controversies in regards to House of the Dragon, the fucking dagger. Like, oh, the dagger tells the actual secret history of why Aegon the Conqueror conquered the Seven Kingdoms, because the fucking White Walkers. George was heavily involved with House of the Dragon, so does that mean he's kind of giving the okay for that? Verdict is still out on that. This, however, the whole Bronze Age thing, George was not involved, so that's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is, in the leaked script, remember, this is from the pilot. The ending of the episode is when the Andals arrive. So this is all First Men.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I didn't know that.
I mean, obviously, there's still like I mean, obviously, in the story, there's the First Men were all using bronze, and the Andals brought steel, brought iron. So that, there is this split there. So it's not illogical that this would be Bronze Age, but still in story, they're talking about knights and castles and things like that. And when you start using those words, you imagine medieval, despite them using bronze. They never. I'm trying to think of like what other words besides like castle and knight,
Squire, stuff like that.
Yeah. Some sort of like classic things that make us think of the Middle Ages.
There's
notes,
another
towers.
interesting thing I forgot to mention until now, Preston. So, Trey, do you know anything about the leaked script, allegedly leaked script, the plot points?
Yeah. I've heard some stuff about the plot points, like the children of the forest, and there's the meteor. The one that was the most interesting thing was the comet or meteor or something like that.
Oh Jesus! This fucking I no offense, but I would rather avoid this fucking comet meteor bullshit, because we discussed it ad nauseum, and motherfuckers were like, "Well, why don't you give credit?" Suck my dick. No offense, I would rather avoid that, but because we did discuss it. But the one thing I wanted to bring up is I just realized this. So in the leaked script, alleged leaked script, Lan the Clever was a prisoner that the Starks were bringing as an offering to the Casterlys. And of course, as we all know, in the mythos, Lan the Clever swindled the Casterlys out of Casterly Rock and took it over. The end of the episode happens with the Andals arriving. So somehow, in this entire series, Lan was going to swindle them out of Casterly Rock, and despite being a First Men, would be allowed to keep the Westerlands and Casterly Rock. The Andals were just going to somehow like let him take it, let him keep it. That's something I found very interesting. So,
I mean, maybe as part of the thing, the reason he gets it is he aligns himself with the Andals or something.
That's probably it. I don't know if you saw our video on it, Trey, about how like they were gonna have black people as the original inhabitants of Westeros, and then some kind of curse turns them into the children of the forest, and like Curse of Ham type of situations. But this is all Bronze Age stuff, including like some of the Roman aesthetics, because those hairstyles reminds me of this character from Spartacus.
Oh yeah, like
and that's about Roman times.
Yeah, like they're definitely there's a mix. There's like a mix of stuff from like the Bronze Age, like with the Syrian relief. The sword looks Mycenaean, which is Bronze Age, but his armor and helmet is more like Peloponnesian War, Roman times, which is like Iron Age. So maybe they're like, I don't know, they're kind of fusing things together. And you're right, like hairstyle might be more Roman too.
Fuck, I love that you're able to see it and like confirm it immediately. That's fucking cool as shit. I'm very serious. That's really cool.
It's fun. It's funny to be. This is like the archaeology brain. Is you're kind of like cursed to like notice certain types from certain periods, especially like artifacts. Like I can't watch. I can watch historical movies, of course, but like if I'm watching a historical movie and I'm looking at like the background details, like the props, I can know like what exactly that inspired that prop sometimes, and like what time period that prop belongs in, as opposed to like what time period it's supposed to be set in the movie. It's a very funny
that's got to ruin
thing.
it for you, because I'm sure they mix and match it to see like what looks cool, despite the time periods being like,
Oh,
Sorry,
exactly, yeah.
Oh, but I was just mentioning that there's some other weird things. Like, okay, the yes, they're using bronze, but a lot of things come with like the Bronze Age. Like you were saying, like they don't have like stirrups and proper saddles.
Oh
So
yeah.
this is why they were using more chariots, but this is also why they had to build better roads.
Hmm.
And so roads in some ways were like there was more time and care put into roads during kind of Bronze Age, because you didn't need to do that once you had like, you know, a good horse, and you're not using a freaking chariot or a wagon or whatever, you know.
Right.
All sorts of like little things like that can like shift and change. And I like, we don't see any aqueducts. We don't have any like story about aqueducts in Westeros. Like there's no like ruins of aqueducts anywhere, right? Like like just little things like that where I'm like, huh. You know,
I always
why
really
aren't those
wondered-
things in Westeros?
I always really wondered when stirrups and saddles were adopted in A Song of Ice and Fire, and I don't know if we'll ever get. I don't know. I always thought it was curious, like especially with like chariots and stuff, because essentially what happened in real life is that saddles and stirrups eventually replace chariots. Like people no longer use chariots, especially in battles, because like actually riding a horse with a saddle and horsemanship was more maneuverable. And it's, I don't know, it always hangs in my mind, like, okay, when in George's world, who gave the world stirrups and saddles and stuff? Because especially in our world, stirrups was like a really like late invention, because the whole point of so like knights, you're like a mounted warrior on a horse wearing armor, and it kind of requires stirrups for your feet to have like power to like swing down. It's a different type of horsemanship, as opposed to like what Greeks and Romans did without stirrups. So I don't know. I'm curious when it was like adopted, like if like the Dothraki gave it to the world and spread it over or something like that. I don't know. It's something I would ask George, and I'm assuming George would just not have an answer. George would be like, I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah, because he didn't think about that and read it. And it also like there's this idea of like when the stirrup is invented versus like when it's actually like put into widespread use,
Right.
and adopted. Like, you know, these sorts of things never line up. You know, because a lot of times it'll be like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. The stirrup was invented, blah, blah, blah. I just looked at the Wikipedia and the stirrup was invented, blah, blah, blah. But a lot has to do with like when it was actually implemented. Like there's this argument a lot about like iron and steel and bronze, and like when the technology like came about. And it's like, no, they actually knew how to make iron and steel a long time ago. Like, well, like, but it just wasn't practical. They're like, they just didn't bother. Like, you know, certain things have to happen for kind of for something to become widespread.
Yeah.
You know? Tin has to become expensive and things like this, you know, like,
yeah, there has to be like the infrastructure to have it like spread, as opposed to just be invented.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, you know, is every village going to get some massive blast furnace or whatever that you know, in order to produce it? Like, no, it's just easier to use bronze at this point if tin's cheap. But then if tin gets expensive, which it does, you know, I guess we can switch over. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are entire historians who study the evolution of the stirrup, who like specialize in just the stirrup.